All the women fell for the Korean Mafia boss in his club, except the black bartender he really wanted. Part 2. The first rule of my world, never show fear. I broke it the moment I saw him walk into Jefferson's. 6 months had passed since Ji-hun Kim and I agreed to our careful intersections. 6 months of honest conversations across my bar. 6 months pretending the most dangerous man in Seoul was just another patron while something dangerous grew between us. I'd finally built something real. My bar, my rules, my life. 3,000 miles from New Orleans. 3,000 miles from the man who'd promised he'd kill me if I ever left. Then Damon walked through my door, that familiar smile cutting across his face like a blade. "Hello, Maya," he said, sliding onto a bar stool. Or should I say, Mrs. Williams. The glass in my hand shattered. Blood mixed with bourbon on the bar top. Across the room, Ji-hun looked up from his conversation, instantly alert to the shift in atmosphere. Our eyes met over the crowded space, and for the first time since I'd known him, I felt true terror. Not of Damon. Of what would happen when these two men, these two worlds, collided. "I've been patient," Damon said, reaching across the bar to grip my bleeding wrist. 4 years is a long time to track down a runaway wife. Especially one who stole $2 million from me. Ji-hun was already moving through the crowd, that deadly grace I'd always pretended not to notice now impossible to ignore. 2 killers were about to meet. And I was the battlefield. Like if you need to know what happens when Ji-hun discovers Maya's darkest secret. Comment your prediction. Will he protect the woman who lied to him, or will her past destroy the fragile trust they've built? Subscribe because this collision is about to change everything. Jefferson's had become my sanctuary. My proof that reinvention was possible. The elegant cocktail lounge had flourished over the past 6 months, becoming one of Gangnam's most exclusive destinations. Critics praised the innovative drinks. Patrons appreciated the sophisticated atmosphere and strict no photography policy. Staff valued the fair wages and protective environment I'd created. Most importantly, it was mine. Built without compromises, without debts to dangerous men, without the shadows that had haunted my previous life. Or so I'd thought, until the past walked through my door wearing an expensive suit and a smile that had once been my undoing. "You've done well for yourself," Damon observed, glancing around appreciatively while maintaining his grip on my wrist. "Though you always did have exquisite taste. In venues." His eyes flicked toward Ji-hun, who was now halfway across the room, and in powerful men. I pulled free of his grasp, automatically reaching for a towel to wrap around my bleeding hand. My mind raced through options, escape routes, damage control. But there was no controlling this damage. Not with Ji-hun approaching and Damon clearly ready for confrontation. "You need to leave," I said, voice low and steady despite the adrenaline flooding my system. "This isn't New Orleans. You have no power here." Damon's laugh carried the same charming warmth that had once convinced me he was my protector rather than my jailer. "That's where you're wrong, baby girl. Money is power everywhere. And you're sitting on 2 million of mine." Before I could respond, Ji-hun arrived. Unlike Damon's expansive presence, Ji-hun's power manifested in stillness, a contained violence that made everything around him seem loud and unnecessary. "Is there a problem?" he asked, that deceptively soft voice carrying easily over the ambient noise. Damon turned, assessing Ji-hun with the practiced eye of someone accustomed to sizing up threats. "Ji-hun Kim. Your reputation precedes you. And you are." Ji-hun's expression remained neutral, but I recognized the dangerous focus in his eyes. "Damon Williams. Maya's husband." He emphasized the word, watching for reaction. Though she seems to have forgotten a particular detail during her time in Korea. The shock that crossed Ji-hun's face lasted only a millisecond before his mask of control returned. But I saw it. The brief flash of betrayal. The recalculation happening behind those eyes. "Ji-hun," I started, unsure what I could possibly say to explain. "We should discuss this privately," Ji-hun interrupted, his gaze never leaving Damon. My office is nearby. I'm comfortable right here, Damon replied, leaning back against the bar. In fact, I'm thinking of becoming a regular. My wife makes the best old-fashioned in Asia, don't you agree? The tension between them crackled like live wires. Two apex predators, territorial and calculating, each measuring the other's capacity for violence. Your choice, Ji-hun said finally. Public or private? But this conversation will happen tonight. My head bartender appeared at my elbow, concern evident in her expression. Boss, you're bleeding. Let me take over. The interruption broke the deadlock. I nodded gratefully, handing over my bar towel while maintaining my composure. Gentlemen, I close in 2 hours. Whatever this is can wait until then. Damon smiled, that charming, terrible smile that had once made my heart race for very different reasons. Always the professional. Some things never change. He slid off the bar stool with fluid grace. I'll return at closing. We have much to discuss, all three of us. As he walked away, disappearing into the Seoul night, the space he'd occupied seemed to vibrate with unresolved threat. Ji-hun remained, his presence solid and unreadable. When he finally looked at me, his eyes held questions I wasn't ready to answer. Husband. The single word carried volumes. I met his gaze directly. Ex-husband. Or would be, if I'd been able to divorce him without signing my own death warrant. The money he mentioned. Insurance. And compensation. My voice hardened. I earned every cent of it. Ji-hun nodded once, absorbing this without judgment. For a moment, I glimpsed something unexpectedly vulnerable in his expression. Not betrayal or anger, but concern. I have people who can ensure he leaves Korea tonight, he offered quietly. One call. The offer, so simply stated, so enormous in its implications, crystallized the absurdity of our situation. For months, we'd maintained careful boundaries. Pretended our conversations across the bar were somehow separate from who he was, what he did. And now, with one sentence, those boundaries dissolved. No, I said firmly. This is my problem. I'll handle it. Maya. I mean it, Ji-hun. I looked around at my bar, at the life I'd built through sheer determination. I didn't run from one dangerous man just to depend on another. Something flickered in his eyes, respect mixed with frustration. Then at least let me stay. Until closing. Until he returns. I wanted to refuse. To prove I needed no protection. But the practical part of me, the survivor, recognized the tactical advantage of having Ji-hun present when Damon returned. Fine, I conceded. But this is still my territory. My rules. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Of course. I wouldn't dream of overstepping. For the next 2 hours, I moved through my closing routine with mechanical precision, hyper-aware of both men. Ji-hun sat at his usual corner table, occasionally taking calls but never leaving. Damon returned as promised, taking a booth near the door, nursing a single drink while watching me with unsettling intensity. When the last customer had departed and my staff had been sent home, I locked the front door and turned to face them both. Two men who represented different chapters of my life, one I'd run from, one I'd been circling closer to despite my better judgment. All right, I said, remaining behind the bar where I felt most in control. Let's talk. Damon rose first, approaching with that smooth confidence that had once seemed sophisticated but now read as predatory. You've led us on quite a chase, Maya. Tokyo, Singapore, now Seoul. He gestured around the bar. Though I must say, this is your most impressive disappearing act yet. I wasn't hiding, I replied, the lie smooth on my tongue. I was starting over. With my money. Damon's smile tightened. Money that belongs to people who don't appreciate being stolen from. Ji-hun had joined us now, positioning himself carefully. Not beside me, not quite between Damon and me, but in a spot that gave him tactical advantage if needed. The money was payment, I said flatly. For services rendered. Services? Damon laughed. Is that what we're calling it now? You were my wife, Maya. Not an employee. I was your front, I corrected, anger finally seeping into my voice. Your respectable face for the investors. Your bartender for the meetings with clients who didn't know they were financing cocaine shipments. Your alibi when questions arose about missing competitors. Ji-hun's expression remained neutral, but his focus intensified at the mention of drug trafficking. His own operations, I knew, strictly avoided narcotics, one of his few moral boundaries in an otherwise ruthless empire. And you were well compensated for all of it, Damon countered smoothly. The penthouse. The clothes. The lifestyle. You never complained until the end. Until I found out what really happened to Elise, I said, the name causing Damon's expression to flicker briefly. Your previous wife wasn't as lucky as me, was she? Didn't manage to escape before you decided she was a liability. The atmosphere shifted instantly. Damon's charm evaporated, replaced by the cold calculation I'd glimpsed only in our final days together, when I'd realized the man I'd married was a carefully constructed facade. Careful, Maya, he warned softly. You're making accusations without evidence. The money was evidence, I replied. The ledgers. The photographs. Everything I took when I left, insurance that you wouldn't come after me. Yet here I am. Damon spread his hands in a gesture of inevitability. Because some insurance policies expire. And some debts must be paid. Ji-hun, who had been silent throughout this exchange, finally spoke. What exactly are you proposing, Mr. Williams? Beyond thinly veiled threats. Damon assessed Ji-hun with new interest. Simple. Maya returns what she took, the money and the documentation, and we part ways permanently. I'll even throw in signed divorce papers. And if she doesn't? Ji-hun asked, voice deceptively casual. Then things become complicated. Damon's gaze shifted back to me. For everyone involved in harboring her. Seoul is a beautiful city. It would be unfortunate if your New Orleans problems followed you here. The threat hung in the air, its target deliberately ambiguous. Was he threatening Jefferson's? My staff? Ji-hun himself? The uncertainty was part of the game Damon had always played, keeping people off balance, maintaining control through unpredictability. You're forgetting something important, I said, leaning forward slightly. This isn't New Orleans. You don't have connections here. No network. No protection. I gestured toward Ji-hun without looking at him. But I do. It was a gamble. Claiming an alliance with Ji-hun that we'd never discussed, that contradicted every boundary we'd established in our careful months of intersection. But I recognized the moment required bold moves. Damon's eyes narrowed as he reassessed the dynamic between Ji-hun and me. Is that so? He turned to Ji-hun. Are you willing to go to war over a woman who lied to you? Who's been using you as a shield without your knowledge? Whose past is considerably more complicated than she's led you to believe? Ji-hun's expression remained unreadable. For a terrifying moment, I thought he might simply walk away, leave me to face Damon alone. It would be the rational choice. The business decision. Why risk his empire for a woman who'd kept such significant secrets? Mr. Williams, Ji-hun said finally, his voice carrying that particular softness that made the hairs on my neck rise. I don't know you. I don't know your organization or your capabilities. But you should understand something clearly. He stepped closer, his movements precise and controlled. Maya Jefferson is under my protection. Not because she asked for it. Not because of any relationship between us. But because she is part of my world now, and I do not allow threats in my world to go unaddressed. The declaration hung between us, reshaping everything. In claiming me as part of his world, Ji-hun had obliterated our carefully maintained fiction of separation. Had acknowledged what we'd both been denying, that our intersection had grown into something neither of us had planned. Damon's expression darkened. You're making a mistake, Kim. You don't know what she's capable of. Perhaps not, Ji-hun conceded. But I know what I'm capable of. He reached inside his jacket, producing not a weapon, but a phone. This is your opportunity to leave Korea intact. I suggest you take it. The implied threat was clear. One call, and Ji-hun's considerable resources would mobilize against Damon. In a foreign country, against an established power like the Kim organization, Damon's chances were minimal. A tense silence stretched between them. I held my breath, acutely aware that everything I'd built balanced on the outcome of this confrontation. Finally, Damon laughed, a genuine sound of surprise and reluctant appreciation. Well played, Maya. Always landing on your feet. He stepped back, adjusting his cuffs in a gesture I recognized as his way of regaining composure. But this isn't over. The money belongs to people who don't forgive or forget. I was sent to recover it peacefully. Others won't be so civilized. Deliver a message to your employers, Ji-hun said. Any action against Maya Jefferson will be considered an action against me personally. With all the consequences that implies. Damon nodded slowly, recalculating his position. I'll convey your involvement. He turned to me, eyes lingering with a mixture of anger and something almost like respect. You've chosen interesting protection this time, Maya. I hope it serves you better than I did. With that, he turned and walked toward the door. I followed at a distance to unlock it, maintaining awareness of his every movement until he stepped outside. Before leaving, he paused. For what it's worth, he said quietly, I never intended for you to become collateral damage. You were the one good thing in my life. You were the worst thing in mine, I replied evenly. Don't come back, Damon. After he'd gone, I locked the door with hands that finally allowed themselves to tremble. The adrenaline that had kept me functioning began to ebb, leaving exhaustion in its wake. When I turned, Ji-hun still stood by the bar, watching me with unreadable eyes. You lied to me, he said simply. Not an accusation, just a statement of fact. Yes. I wouldn't insult him with excuses or justifications. By omission, but yes. Why? I moved back behind the bar, my territory, my strength, and poured 2 fingers of whiskey into glasses. Pushing one toward him, I considered my answer carefully. Because the past I left behind was as dark as the one you live in, I said finally. And I needed, to believe I could exist outside of it. That I could build something clean and separate. Ji-hun accepted the glass but didn't drink. The money he mentioned. $2 million. Is it real? Yes. And you took it. I earned it, I corrected again, meeting his gaze directly. For years of being the perfect wife. Of turning a blind eye to what happened in our home, in our businesses. Of smiling through charity events while knowing what paid for them. The bitterness rose in my throat. And then I found the evidence about Elise, his first wife. The one who supposedly died in a boating accident but whose body was never recovered. Ji-hun's expression softened slightly. You were protecting yourself. I was surviving, I clarified. The money and the documentation were my only leverage. Insurance that he wouldn't come after me. Yet he found you anyway. I nodded, taking a long swallow of whiskey. Eventually. I always knew he might. Ji-hun set down his untouched glass. What will you do now? It was the question I'd been asking myself since the moment I recognized Damon at my bar. The careful life I'd constructed was compromised. The walls between my past and present had crumbled. The illusion of safety shattered. I don't know, I admitted. Move again, perhaps. Start over somewhere new. Running, Ji-hun observed. Surviving, I corrected again. He was silent for a moment, studying me with that penetrating gaze that had fascinated me from our first meeting. The look that seemed to see beyond carefully constructed surfaces to the truth beneath. What you said to Damon, he began carefully. About having connections here. About being under my protection. Was that a calculated move, or do you actually want my involvement? The question cut to the heart of our complicated relationship. For months, we'd maintained a fiction that our worlds could intersect without merging. That we could share honesty across a bar without entangling our lives. That attraction, which we both acknowledged but never acted upon, could exist in a vacuum, separate from who we were and the baggage we carried. I don't know, I said again, honesty the only currency I had left to offer. I've spent 4 years ensuring I never needed anyone's protection again. Never depended on anyone with power over me. I met his eyes directly. But I also know Damon. Know the people he works for. And they won't stop coming just because you scared him off tonight. Ji-hun nodded, accepting this assessment. The most dangerous threats are the ones with nothing to lose. Your ex-husband will lose face if he returns empty-handed. That makes him unpredictable. Yes. So we have a problem, Ji-hun concluded. One that affects both of us now. The shift in language wasn't lost on me. Not your problem. Our problem. The boundary between his world and mine, already fragile, had finally shattered completely. What are you suggesting? I asked, wary of where this might lead. Ji-hun moved around the bar, crossing the physical boundary that had separated us during most of our interactions, until he stood directly before me. Close enough that I could smell his subtle cologne, see the faint scar near his right eyebrow I'd always wondered about. I'm suggesting we stop pretending, he said quietly. Stop maintaining this fiction that our worlds can remain separate while we circle each other. Stop denying what's been growing between us for months. My heart raced at his proximity, at the directness of his words. And what exactly has been growing, Ji-hun? Trust, he said simply. Despite your omissions. Despite my reputation. We've built something rare between us. Something honest. Honest? I couldn't help the bitter laugh that escaped. I've been hiding my entire past from you. Not the parts that matter. His gaze held mine, unwavering. You showed me who you are in the present, your strength, your principles, your refusal to be owned or controlled. The past explains those qualities, but it doesn't define them. His understanding, so unexpected, so complete, nearly undid me. For months, I'd been bracing for judgment from everyone who might discover my history. Had built walls to protect myself from the inevitable condemnation. Yet here was Ji-hun Kim, the most dangerous man in Seoul, offering not judgment but acceptance. What are you proposing? I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. An alliance, he replied. No more intersections. No more careful distance. A true partnership. Business or personal? The question slipped out before I could censor it. Something like a smile touched his lips. Is there a difference for people like us? The question hung between us, loaded with implications. For people whose lives were their work, whose passions defined their identities, the line between business and personal had always been blurred. What would this alliance entail? I asked, practical concerns surfacing despite the emotional undercurrent. My resources to ensure your safety. My connections to resolve your Damon problem permanently. Ji-hun's expression remained serious. In return, your continued honesty. Your perspective that challenges me. Your presence in my life not as decoration or subordinate, but as equal. Equal, I repeated skeptically. In your world, that word has limited meaning. Then help me expand its definition. He reached out, not quite touching me, his hand hovering near my face. Maya, I've spent my life surrounded by people who want something from me. Power, protection, privilege. You're the only person who ever looked at what I could offer and said no thank you. Despite everything, the tension, the danger, the uncertainty, I found myself smiling. I've been rather difficult, haven't I? Impossible, he agreed, his own smile emerging briefly. And entirely necessary. The moment stretched between us, charged with possibilities. I knew accepting his offer would fundamentally change everything, would bind my future to his in ways I couldn't fully predict. Yet refusing meant facing Damon and his employers alone, meant continuing to run, meant denying the connection that had been growing despite all my efforts to contain it. If we do this, I said slowly, there need to be boundaries. Clear ones. Name them, Ji-hun responded immediately. Jefferson's remains mine. My territory, my rules. No Kim family business conducted here. He nodded. Agreed. My staff remains civilian. No recruitment, no involvement in anything outside legitimate business. Reasonable. I took a deep breath. And you don't make decisions for me. Ever. We discuss. We plan. But my autonomy is non-negotiable. Ji-hun considered this final condition carefully. Even in matters of security. Especially then. I held his gaze steadily. I left one controlling man who claimed protection as his right. I won't accept another, no matter how well-intentioned. Something shifted in his expression. A recognition, perhaps, of how closely his world paralleled the one I'd escaped. How easy it would be for protection to become control, for security to become another form of cage. Agreed, he said finally. Partners, not protector and protected. The word settled between us, reshaping our relationship into something neither of us had anticipated when we'd first locked eyes across the Obsidian's crowded floor. Partners. Equals in a dangerous game. Then we have an alliance, I said, extending my hand formally. Ji-hun looked at my offered hand with something like amusement, then reached past it to touch my face gently. The contact, the first he'd ever initiated between us, sent electricity through my skin. We have much more than that, he said softly. But an alliance is where we'll start. The tension that had always simmered beneath our careful conversations suddenly crystallized into something undeniable. For months, we'd maintained professional distance, allowing only our minds to connect while keeping our bodies carefully separate. Now, with barriers falling and truths exposed, the attraction we'd both acknowledged but never acted upon demanded attention. Ji-hun's hand remained on my face, a question in his touch. Waiting for permission. Respecting boundaries even as they evolved. I made the decision consciously, deliberately. Not carried away by emotion or fear or gratitude, but with clear-eyed awareness of what it meant. Stepping forward, I closed the remaining distance between us, my hands rising to rest against his chest. An alliance, I agreed, with certain additional benefits. His smile, rare and genuine, transformed his face before he lowered his mouth to mine. The kiss began carefully, almost tentatively, both of us still measuring boundaries. Then something broke loose. Months of restraint, of denial, of carefully maintained distance collapsing all at once. His hand slid into my hair, cradling my head with unexpected gentleness even as the kiss deepened into something hungry and demanding. I responded with equal intensity, allowing myself to acknowledge what I'd been suppressing since the night he'd first sat at my bar in the Obsidian, that Ji-hun Kim fascinated me not despite the danger he represented, but partially because of it. Because he understood darkness in ways few others could. When we finally broke apart, both slightly breathless, the world had shifted on its axis. There would be no returning to our careful intersections, our professional distance. Whatever happened next, with Damon, with the money, with the collision of our worlds, we would face it together. I should go, Ji-hun said, though his hands remained on me. We both need time to process tonight's developments. The practicality of his suggestion steadied me, reminded me that whatever was growing between us would be built on mutual respect rather than desperate passion. Yes, I agreed, stepping back slightly. And I need to consider next steps regarding Damon. Ji-hun's expression hardened at the name. He won't act immediately. He'll report back to his employers, reassess based on my involvement. That gives us time to prepare. Us, I repeated, testing the word, the concept of no longer facing threats alone. Us, he confirmed. Partners, remember. As I watched him leave Jefferson's that night, I knew with absolute certainty that everything had changed. The careful life I'd constructed, the boundaries I'd maintained, the independence I'd guarded so fiercely, all transformed by the collision of past and present. Yet strangely, I felt no regret. Only a curious sense of inevitability, as if all paths had been leading to this moment, this alliance, this man. As if the universe had a peculiar sense of irony, bringing me 3,000 miles only to discover that safety might exist not in running from dangerous men, but in aligning with one who understood the rules of darkness. The days that followed established new patterns between us. Ji-hun began spending evenings at Jefferson's openly now, no longer maintaining the fiction that he was just another patron. Sometimes he worked from a corner table, surrounded by documents and a constantly buzzing phone. Sometimes he simply watched me work, that penetrating gaze following my movements with appreciation that was both professional and decidedly personal. After closing, we would talk for hours. No longer separated by the bar, but side by side, deconstructing our days, planning our response to the Damon situation, learning each other's histories in greater detail. Occasionally, those conversations led to more intimate encounters, in my office, on the leather couches in the lounge's private room, once even against the bar itself after a particularly tense day. But we maintained some boundaries. I didn't visit his territory, his penthouse, his offices, the Obsidian. He didn't bring his business associates to Jefferson's. We existed in a careful balance, neither fully in nor fully out of each other's worlds. A week after Damon's appearance, Ji-hun arrived earlier than usual, his expression grave. "We have information," he said without preamble, setting a folder on the bar. I glanced at it warily. "About?" "Damon Williams. And the organization he represents." He opened the folder, revealing photographs and documents. He wasn't lying about the money belonging to dangerous people. The Martelli family controls most of New Orleans' cocaine distribution. They use legitimate businesses, restaurants, bars, shipping companies, as fronts. "I know," I said quietly. "Why do you think I ran?" Ji-hun nodded, acknowledging this. "What you may not know is that they've expanded operations in recent years, including tentative moves into Asian markets." He indicated a particular document. "They've been seeking distribution channels in Tokyo, Singapore, and now Korea." The implication struck me immediately. They didn't just send Damon for the money. They sent him to establish connections here. Exactly. Ji-hun's expression was grim. "Which makes our situation more complicated. This isn't just about your past anymore. It's about their future plans for my territory." The territorial language might once have bothered me, reminded me too much of Damon's possessiveness. But I'd come to understand that for Ji-hun, territory wasn't about ownership but responsibility, the areas and people under his protection, under his code. "So what's our play?" I asked, unconsciously adopting the partnership language we'd established. Ji-hun's eyes met mine, approval flickering in their depths at my direct approach. "Two options. Diplomatic or decisive." "Meaning?" "Diplomatic, we negotiate. Return the money in exchange for guaranteed separation. They agree to leave you alone and conduct their business elsewhere in Asia." "And decisive?" Ji-hun's expression hardened. "We make it abundantly clear that the Martelli family is not welcome in Seoul. By whatever means necessary." The implication hung between us, violence, perhaps deaths. The kind of decisive action that had built Ji-hun's reputation, that maintained his power. The kind of darkness I'd been running from. "There must be a third option," I said, unwilling to accept either outcome. Ji-hun raised an eyebrow, waiting. "Leverage," I continued, thinking aloud. "The documentation I took when I left, it doesn't just prove what happened to Elise. It contains details of their entire operation. Distribution networks. Political connections. Financial structures." I met his eyes. "Information that would be valuable to certain law enforcement agencies. Or to rival organizations." Understanding dawned in Ji-hun's expression. "You're suggesting we threaten exposure if they don't agree to leave both of us alone." Mutually assured destruction, I confirmed. They leave us in peace, or we ensure they face consequences that far outweigh $2 million and a wounded ego. Ji-hun studied me with new appreciation. You continue to surprise me, Maya Jefferson. Is that a good thing? I asked, suddenly uncertain. His smile carried unexpected warmth. It's the best thing. Most people in my world become predictable. Calculating the same advantages, following the same patterns. You think differently. The compliment warmed me more than it should have. For years with Damon, my independent thinking had been discouraged, my suggestions dismissed. With Ji-hun, it was valued, not despite our different perspectives, but because of them. So we pursue the leverage option, I confirmed. Yes. He gathered the documents, returning them to the folder. But we need to be prepared for potential consequences. If they believe we're serious about exposure, they might decide elimination is their only option. The clinical way he discussed potential threats against us should have been disturbing. Instead, I found it reassuring, his willingness to look unflinchingly at worst-case scenarios, to plan for all contingencies. Then we ensure they understand that any move against either of us would trigger automatic release of the documentation, I suggested. Dead man switch protocols. Ji-hun nodded slowly. Workable. But it requires them to believe we have such systems in place. Then we need to demonstrate our seriousness. I considered the problem from multiple angles. A sample. Something significant enough to prove we have the full documentation, but not damaging enough to provoke immediate retaliation. Diplomatic but decisive, Ji-hun summarized, merging our approaches. I like it. As we continued planning late into the night, I found myself marveling at the strange alchemy of our partnership. My strategic thinking complemented his tactical experience. My understanding of the Martelli organization balanced his knowledge of Asian power structures. Together, we created approaches neither would have developed alone. More remarkable still was the ease between us. The way our minds connected, challenging and building upon each other without ego or dominance battles. In Damon's world, partnerships were always about control. In Ji-hun's, they were typically about submission. Yet somehow, we'd created something different, a genuine alliance of equals. When we finally completed our planning, Ji-hun pulled me closer, his expression shifting from strategic to personal. You know, in all our discussions about your past, you never explained one thing. What's that? I asked, relaxing against him. How a New Orleans girl became the best mixologist in Seoul. The question, so mundane compared to our recent topics, startled a laugh from me. That's what you want to know. Not more about the Martellis or Damon or the money. I want to know everything about you, he said simply. Not just the parts relevant to our current situation. The honesty in his statement touched something deep within me. A longing to be known for all my complexities, not just my usefulness or my problems. My grandfather taught me, I said, settling more comfortably against him. He ran a jazz club in the French Quarter. Let me experiment behind the bar from the time I was tall enough to reach the counter. Said I had the touch, the ability to match flavors to people, to create drinks that complemented music and mood. Ji-hun listened intently as I described my journey. From my grandfather's bar to prestigious cocktail competitions, from New Orleans to New York where I'd met Damon, from reluctant corporate wife to runaway with a new identity in Tokyo. And Seoul, he prompted. Why here specifically? I smiled at the memory. An article about the emerging craft cocktail scene. It mentioned this intense, perfectionist owner of a club called the Obsidian who demanded excellence from every employee. Ji-hun's eyebrows rose. You came to Seoul because of me? Not exactly, I clarified. I came because the article suggested Seoul was a place where craft was valued over flash, where substance could triumph over style. It seemed like somewhere I could build something real. I glanced at him mischievously. Meeting you was an unexpected complication. Complication, he repeated, drawing me closer. Is that what I am? The most fascinating complication of my life, I admitted, allowing myself the vulnerability of truth. His kiss was gentler than usual, almost reverent. When he pulled back, his expression had softened in a way I rarely witnessed, the hardened businessman momentarily set aside, revealing the man beneath. "Stay with me tonight," he said quietly. "Not here. At my home." The invitation represented a significant shift, moving our relationship from the neutral territory of Jefferson's into his personal space. Crossing another boundary. "Your penthouse," I said, considering. "Your territory." "Our territory," he corrected. "If you want it to be." The amendment, so simple yet profound, demonstrated how far we'd both come from our initial wariness. Ji-hun, willing to share his most private space as equal ground. Me, considering entering the inner sanctum of a powerful man without fear of being trapped there. Yes, I decided, the word feeling like both an answer and a commitment. "I'll stay with you tonight." If you believe two people from different worlds can find understanding in the most unlikely places, like this video now. Comment below, what secrets are you still keeping from those closest to you? Subscribe for the next chapter in this story of danger, desire, and the unexpected places we find safety. Ji-hun's penthouse occupied the top floor of a sleek building in Gangnam, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views of Seoul's nighttime skyline. Unlike the obsidian's calculated opulence, his private space surprised me with its understated elegance, clean lines, natural materials, carefully chosen art that spoke of personal taste rather than status seeking. "Not what you expected?" he asked, noticing my expression as we entered. "More peaceful," I admitted. "I imagined something more." "Intimidating," he suggested, amusement touching his eyes. "Performative," I clarified. "Designed to impress rather than to live in." Ji-hun removed his jacket, hanging it precisely in a closet near the door. "I perform enough in public. Here, I need space to simply exist." The sentiment resonated deeply. My own apartment, small but carefully designed, served the same purpose. A sanctuary where masks could be removed, where no performance was required. As Ji-hun moved to the kitchen, retrieving a bottle of wine and 2 glasses with practiced ease, I explored the space. Unlike most luxury apartments I'd visited, which often felt like showcases rather than homes, his revealed subtle signs of genuine habitation, books with marked pages, a notebook with handwritten notes, a worn cushion on his preferred chair. Most revealing was a small traditional wooden chest displayed prominently in the living area. When I approached it, Ji-hun watched carefully but didn't object as I examined the intricate carving. "Family heirloom?" I guessed. "Yes." He joined me, wine glasses in hand. "My grandmother's. The only possession she brought when fleeing North Korea during the war." The personal history behind the object touched me. For all his power and wealth, Ji-hun kept this simple wooden chest as his most treasured possession, a connection to family, to history, to roots. "It's beautiful," I said, accepting the wine he offered. "It contains letters," he continued, surprising me with the voluntary sharing of personal information. Correspondence between my grandparents during their separation. Years of waiting, hoping, planning to reunite. "And did they?" I asked, genuinely curious. "Eventually. After 3 years apart." His expression softened with rare vulnerability. "My father was conceived the night they reunited." The romanticism of the story contrasted sharply with Ji-hun's public persona, the cold, calculating businessman, the feared power behind Seoul's underworld. Yet it aligned perfectly with the man I'd come to know in our private moments, thoughtful, appreciative of meaning beyond material value. "Thank you for sharing that with me," I said quietly. Ji-hun studied me over his wine glass. "You're the first person I've brought here who's asked about the chest. Most see the view, the art, the obvious displays of wealth. You notice the things that matter." The observation hung between us, weighted with implications about how he saw me, how I differed from others in his life. "I spent years with a man who used possessions as distractions," I explained. "Expensive gifts to compensate for ugly truths. I learned to look past surfaces. To the meaning beneath, Ji-hun concluded. It's what you do with flavors too. Find the essence beyond the obvious. His understanding, so complete, so unexpected, created a moment of perfect connect. Ion between us. For all our differences, for all the complications of our situations, we shared this fundamental approach to life, seeking substance beneath style, truth beneath performance. The evening unfolded with surprising ease. We talked for hours, sharing stories and perspectives without the pressure of strategic planning or crisis management. I told him about my grandfather's jazz club, about music that had shaped my understanding of rhythm and balance. He described his early years taking over family businesses, navigating between legitimate enterprises and shadowed operations. When conversation finally gave way to physical connection, it felt like a natural progression rather than a destination. Ji-hun's touch carried the same careful attention he brought to everything important, observant, responsive, focused on mutual pleasure rather than demonstration of skill. Afterward, lying beside him in the darkness with Seoul's lights glittering below, I experienced an unfamiliar sense of peace. Not the hypervigilant calm I'd maintained since leaving New Orleans, but genuine contentment. For the first time in years, I felt truly safe, not because Ji-hun would protect me, but because together we were formidable in ways neither could be alone. "What are you thinking?" he asked, fingers tracing patterns on my bare shoulder. "That I spent years running from a man like Damon, only to end up with a man like you." Ji-hun's hand stilled. "A man like me," he repeated carefully. "Meaning?" I turned to face him in the dimness. "Powerful. Connected to worlds most people never see. Capable of both protection and destruction." He was silent for a moment, absorbing this comparison. "The similarities are surface level," he said finally. "Damon uses power to control. To possess. I use it to maintain balance. To protect what matters." "I know," I assured him, touching his face gently. "That's why I'm here. Because you understand power without being corrupted by it. Because you offer protection without demanding ownership in return." The distinction seemed to satisfy him. He pulled me closer, his body warm against mine in the cool air of the bedroom. "We should sleep," he murmured against my hair. "Tomorrow will be complicated. Tomorrow." When we would implement our plan to contact the Martelli family. When we would leverage my stolen documentation against their ambitions in Asia. When our personal connection would be tested by professional dangers. "Ji-hun," I said softly, suddenly needing to clarify something important. "Whatever happens with Damon, with the Martellis. I need you to know that this, us, isn't just about protection or alliance." His arms tightened around me. "I know. Do you?" I pressed, needing the certainty of explicit understanding. "Because I've spent my adult life having my motivations questioned, my relationships reduced to transactions. And what's happening between us is something else entirely." Ji-hun shifted, raising himself on one elbow to look at me directly. In the faint light from the city below, his expression was unusually open, vulnerable in ways few ever witnessed. "Maya," he said, my name in his voice carrying weight beyond its syllables. "I've built an empire based on my ability to read people's true intentions. To see past words to motivations. And everything about you, from the first night you ignored me at the Obsidian to this moment, has been authentic. Real. That reality is what draws me to you. Not convenience. Not strategic advantage. Not even the undeniable chemistry between us." The confession, so direct, so unguarded, touched something deep within me. For years, I'd maintained walls, kept parts of myself hidden, protected my core self from exposure. Yet here, with this man whom the world feared, I found myself wanting to be fully known. "I think I might be falling in love with you," I admitted, the words slipping out before I could analyze their wisdom. "And that terrifies me more than Damon ever could." Ji-hun's expression shifted, surprise giving way to something softer, more intense. "Because love makes you vulnerable." "Yes," I whispered. "Yet you tell me anyway." His hand cradled my face gently. Your courage continues to humble me. Is it courage or foolishness? I wondered aloud. With matters of the heart. Often both. His thumb traced my lower lip with exquisite tenderness. But for what it's worth, I believe I've been falling since the night you told me I struck you as someone who appreciated precision over patriotism. The memory, from our first real interaction at the Obsidian, made me smile despite the seriousness of our conversation. That long, he confirmed. Though I fought it considerably longer than you did. The admission transformed something between us, shifting our connection from the careful alliance with benefits we'd negotiated to something deeper, more vulnerable, more complete. Not just minds and bodies aligned, but hearts cautiously opening. Sleep, he said finally, settling me against him once more. Tomorrow we face the world. Tonight, just be here with me. I closed my eyes, allowing myself to sink into the unfamiliar comfort of being held by someone I trusted completely, a trust built not on blind faith or dependency, but on demonstrated integrity, on consistent respect, on shared strength. Morning arrived with sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows and the subtle chime of Ji-hun's phone. I watched through half-closed eyes as he answered it, his voice shifting immediately into business mode. Commanding, precise, brooking no argument. The transformation was fascinating, the tender man who had held me through the night becoming the powerful figure Seoul's underworld feared. Yet even as he issued directives, his free hand absently stroked my hair, maintaining our connection while he handled whatever crisis had arisen. The duality was remarkable, and reassuring. Ji-hun compartmentalized his worlds with precision, but he didn't become a different person within them. The core of him. His intelligence, his attention to detail, his unflinching honesty, remained consistent regardless of context. When he ended the call, he turned to me with a slight smile. Good morning. I hope that didn't wake you. It's interesting to watch you work, I observed, stretching lazily. Your voice changes. Your posture shifts. But your eyes stay the same. His eyebrow rose slightly. You notice such details even half asleep? Professional hazard, I replied. Bartenders study people. Especially dangerous ones. Am I dangerous to you? He asked, the question carrying layers of meaning. I considered this seriously. To my independence, perhaps. To my heart, definitely. I touched his face gently. But not to myself. That's the difference that matters. Understanding passed between us, the recognition that healthy connection didn't require surrendering identity, that true partnership enhanced rather than diminished individual strength. Ji-hun leaned down to kiss me briefly. We need to prepare. My contact has arranged the secure communication channel for noon. Reality intruded, reminding us that beyond this peaceful bedroom lay complications neither of us could ignore. Damon. The Martellis. The documentation that represented both danger and protection. I'll need to stop at my apartment, I said, shifting into planning mode. The evidence is there. Ji-hun tensed slightly. Is that wise? If they're watching. It's secured, I assured him. Not in my apartment directly, but accessible from it. He nodded, accepting this. Then we go together. I'll have security sweep the area first. The morning proceeded with efficient preparation. Ji-hun provided clothes he'd apparently purchased for contingencies, a simple outfit in my size that somehow perfectly matched my style. We shared breakfast on his terrace, discussing final details of our approach to the Martellis while the sun rose fully over Seoul. By mid-morning, we were in his car heading toward my apartment in Itaewon. Unlike the sleek luxury of Gangnam, my neighborhood offered eclectic charm, international restaurants, small art galleries, a vibrant street life that had attracted me with its energy and diversity. As we approached my building, Ji-hun's driver slowed, circling the block once before parking. Security confirmed the area is clear, Ji-hun informed me. No surveillance detected. The professional assessment should have reassured me. Instead, it heightened my awareness of how much had changed in just over a week. From maintaining careful separation to integrated security protocols. From independent lives to coordinated movements. My apartment occupied the third floor of a converted commercial building, smaller than Ji-hun's penthouse but designed with similar attention to personal comfort rather than impression management. Clean lines, open spaces, carefully chosen colors that created calm. Ji-hun noticed this as we entered. Our tastes align more than I expected. Functional minimalism, I agreed, moving through the space with practiced efficiency. Everything necessary, nothing superfluous. While Ji-hun examined the apartment with quiet appreciation, I approached the built-in bookshelf that covered one wall. Selecting a specific volume, Baldwin's Another Country. I revealed the hidden compartment behind it containing a small fireproof safe. Clever, Ji-hun observed. Hidden in plain sight. The best secrets usually are. I entered the combination, retrieving a hard drive and a small notebook. Digital and analog backups. The hard drive contains scanned documents, financial records, photographs. The notebook contains locations, contacts, and codes that aren't stored electronically. Ji-hun's eyes reflected respect for my thoroughness. You were meticulous in your planning. When your life depends on information, you protect it accordingly. I secured both items in my bag. This is everything we need to demonstrate our seriousness to the Martellis. As we prepared to leave, Ji-hun paused, studying a framed photograph on my desk, the only personal item displayed in the otherwise minimal space. It showed an older black man behind a bar, laughing as he mixed drinks. Your grandfather, he guessed. I nodded, unexpected emotion tightening my throat. Taken at his club about a year before he died. The last time I saw him. Ji-hun touched the frame gently. He taught you more than mixology. It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. Everything important. Integrity. Independence. The difference between compromise and surrender. I smiled sadly at the memory. He would have hated Damon on sight. Probably would have been wary of you too, at first. And eventually? Ji-hun asked, genuine curiosity in his voice. I considered this, trying to imagine my wise, perceptive grandfather assessing the complex man before me. He would have seen past the surface. Recognized the substance. Approved of how you respect boundaries. My smile widened. But he still would have threatened you with his shotgun if you hurt me. Ji-hun's laugh, rare and genuine, filled the apartment. I would expect nothing less. The moment of lightness eased the tension of our mission. As we left my apartment, I felt the significance of what we were about to do, directly confronting the organization I'd fled, leveraging their own information against them, establishing boundaries that would either secure our future or escalate the conflict beyond recovery. Are you certain about this approach? Ji-hun asked as we returned to his car. Once initiated, there's no retreating to safer strategies. I appreciated his final check, his respect for my agency in decisions that affected my life. I'm certain. Returning the money without leverage would only show weakness. Destruction would provoke retaliation. This balanced approach is our best option. He nodded, accepting my assessment. Then let's proceed. The secure communication happened not at Ji-hun's penthouse or offices, but at a nondescript building his organization maintained specifically for sensitive negotiations. The space contained state-of-the-art security measures, signal jammers, surveillance detection, multiple escape routes. Impressive setup, I observed as his security team completed final checks. Necessity, Ji-hun replied simply. In my world, information security determines survival. The actual call was anticlimactic after our extensive preparation. Ji-hun's technical team established the secure connection, verifying that the individual on the other end was indeed Antonio Martelli. Damon's employer and the family's primary decision-maker regarding Asian expansion. Mr. Martelli, Ji-hun began, his voice carrying the particular authority he reserved for business negotiations. Thank you for agreeing to this discussion. Curiosity more than agreement, Mr. Kim, came the response, the voice carrying a hint of New Orleans beneath its Italian cadence. When a man of your reputation requests a conversation, declining seems unwise. Practical assessment, Ji-hun acknowledged. I'll be equally practical. Your representative Damon Williams has created a situation that could be problematic for both our organizations. My understanding is that Williams was retrieving stolen property, Martelli countered smoothly. Property belonging to my family. Ji-hun's eyes met mine, silently confirming our next move. I leaned toward the speaker. Mr. Martelli, this is Maya Jefferson. Using my current name rather than my married name was a deliberate choice, establishing identity on my terms. We both know the $2 million is secondary to what accompanied it. Silence stretched for several seconds before Martelli responded, his voice notably cooler. Ms. Jefferson. Or should I say Mrs. Williams? Your disappearance caused considerable inconvenience. Not as much inconvenience as what I took with me